On this episode, we welcome David Putz of JPK Holdings. David discusses with Joe how he has taken steps to automate the note buying process, making copy and paste a thing of the past. They talk about what they both believe the future of the note and real estate business will look like and what you need to look out for before things change.
Hello, David. Welcome to the show. Let's get rolling by giving us a brief background about your investing experience and what assets you are in today.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. I've been in real estate since 2006 or so. Where I was doing rentals in 2010. I joined up with a friend of ours that has a large fund, but that time was very small. Just doing due diligence, analyzing values of properties. He was buying mortgage notes in the first position space with a little bit of money. Over the next 2 years, I pretty much just kind of helped out, valuing assets, figuring out where I want to go with things, and just understanding the idea of what mortgage notes are. I then transitioned to, in 2012, buy my own stuff. From 2012 to 2015, I was just tinkering around, figuring things out, attending a lot of conferences, just understanding what mortgage notes were from the investment side versus just the evaluation side. We then moved on to, in 2015, created the company, JKP Holdings, and then eventually brought into a private equity fund where we're privately funded, buying notes first and seconds, and then moving on to the fact that now bringing out automation tools and resources for all different investors, notes as well as real estate. That's a quick, brief summary of what we've done.
Well, that's good. I mean, what was so appealing about getting into mortgage notes, right? I mean, everyone always wonders how somebody falls into something or what is the attraction to lure you in to, roll with it. What was yours?
So 2009, I had a tenant who was on the phone with the Board of Health. As I walked in, she was upset that I bought her a small fridge where she wanted a real full fridge for one person in a small place. In turn, she turned to me and said, "Oh my God, my landlord just pushed me down," on the phone with Board of Health. And my wife was with me and I said, "Listen, this is just not fun. We've gone through tenants, deal with the issues, weren't big enough to have someone manage things." And at that point, I got introduced to it, the fact that I could be in real estate without being in brick and mortar real estate. And that was a huge attraction. I didn't have to be local. I didn't need to deal with these kind of situations. And that turned me over to learn about it. When I learned about it, I realized it was more legal computers analyzing than the day-to-day handling of things. So that was a huge attraction for me.
So were you, I guess, how did you learn, right? I mean, how'd you get started? Who was your mentor, coach, or, if you weren't familiar with the business, how'd you go?
So I was very privileged. A longtime childhood friend of mine, Jack Krupe, who was in the space for a few years before that, kind of held me under his umbrella and said, "Listen, I just want you to do this." And as things happened, we kind of fixed things and he taught me along the way. He wasn't the best teacher in the world, but he is very knowledgeable, as we both know. And during that process of figuring things out, I would ask questions and he'd respond. And I would learn by watching him and doing things with him. Then I turned to the community of note investors and said, "Listen, I'm stuck here or stuck there." Didn't have any formal training, but what I did find is a formal training gave you a huge network. So notes is partially knowledge and the other half is huge networking. So those two factors came into play and Jack became a mentor of mine and a lot of the note-based investors became mentors that I wanted to emulate in different aspects of their investment strategy.
That's interesting. Just a week or two ago, I was speaking to one of my buddies, just discussing like how we got into certain things over the years or what was the attraction. And one of the things that we had noted was a community, right? And I think that's important for a lot of listeners sometimes when they're searching out kind of business startup or what they're looking to do with their careers is sometimes it's that community that actually molds them and is basically their life, right? And so that's very important.
Huge. I mean, even like with social media, you tend to kind of pull away from all your friends and family and tend to start aligning with people that you network with and lean on and respect and whatnot. Yeah, your life changes. It's awesome.
And most of those people are my friends today that I communicate with, right?
Yeah, it becomes a complete different world and your wife's like, "Who are these people?" But yeah, it's just, you bond instantly because you have something in common, but it's also not competitive space as sometimes brick and mortar real estate could be. So yes, that was a huge attraction for me.
So what is it that JKP is working on today?
Awesome. So we've done a lot of things. We're still buying notes first and seconds, but we're really working on bringing out tools and resources. What we found is we want to work on our strengths. My strengths is technology and understanding what that looks like. With that said, what we realized is that most investors, oddly enough, are not tech savvy. I mean, to the point where they're not even doing spreadsheets comfortably. So what we found is that when we talk spreadsheets, that's second nature to me, they get lost. So what we tried doing is finding a way to help those convert over from either due diligence to automation. And those kind of facets are really going to do with that automating things that you do over and over and over and over again. Because if you do it over and over again, two things happen. It gets redundant, mistakes are made, and those two things can really cause problems. If you're copy pasting or realizing, you skip things, where automation allows you to completely eliminate the possible human error. In what we found when we were copying pasting from Zillow back in the day, 3 bedrooms could be in the wrong spot. And then we analyze things and our numbers are off and we wonder why. Bid calculators were the same thing. You plug and play and then you realize after the bid, like, where did that number come from? So what we did, we decided to automate a lot of that stuff. We got in a step where we're automating bidding by having a huge calculator and processing hundreds of loans. And we realized that other people in the space were still copy pasting. And those errors can be hugely different. Your bid number can be hugely different based on what it should be, all because you put a 0 or a decimal point or a text in the wrong spot. And then we moved on to the fact that we now have the ability to automate getting values and property data and for multiple sources that matter of minutes, not hours or, tens of minutes, whatever it takes to find 5 different values, bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, foreclosure data. And we found that doing that allowed us to kind of condense our time and remove errors and then focus on things that we can do, such as analyzing collateral files, things that need a human touch. So we've just taken that human error out of it and reduced our time.
Yeah, I remember about 8 or 9 years ago when we would have to go on Upwork when it wasn't quite as good 8 to 9 years ago. Yep. And, try to find somebody in India for $100 to create a Zillow scraper, put it into a spreadsheet, yep. And then get a spreadsheet, from CoreLogic, get a spreadsheet from the seller. And then you got 10 spreadsheets. And before you know it, you're copy and pasting, you're doing VLOOKUPs and or something gets screwed up and you don't know what the hell happened, right?
Yeah. And most investors don't even know how to do half of what we just talked about. VLOOKUP is something that's
I didn't before then, man. I never used Excel. I'm not going to lie. So I was one of those.
Yeah, it's huge. And then you learn, and those who are not learning get frustrated and easily get out of the space. And we found a lot of people are using some techniques that are still available today that are bidding based on a percentage of UPB or percentage of BPO, or just taking a straight yield, not caring about the coupon, the interest rate of the loan, and saying, I'm going to bid this number. And you look at yourself and say, well, that doesn't work across the board. Like, it's a good kind of quick parameter, but you can't bid based on that. And a lot of investors were bidding. So we found a huge void that people weren't touching upon in the training sessions. Bid calculator, getting data in a quick, reasonable, error-free way. So we created our portal to do that kind of thing. We've also in the process of creating a bid calculator that's more user-friendly, that people can just plug information in, put their values in, their variables in, and what the return they want, and then it will shoot back a bid number that works for them. So we found that most people struggle because they follow the gurus out there. So it's just interesting to see most investors who are either new or experienced not knowing spreadsheets and not knowing how to bid correctly, and to automate that where you can bid on 50 loans in a matter of minutes by using an automation data capturer and a bid calculator. Errors reduced, times reduced, and you can move on to evaluating assets, collateral file, because the seller likes your bid in a matter of minutes, not days.
Well, if the conferences or the sessions taught you on how to use the bid calculator and how most of the deals might not actually work versus selling you on how great the business is, they might not be in business anymore,
This
right?
is true. This is true. Yeah. Just buy it. Yeah.
So a lot of people, one of the things I've seen, whether, you're note investing or just going into any industry, right, is that when you're coming into something new where you have no previous historical data, it could be a challenge to understand how to underwrite something. So how could you solve them for new people that are coming in?
So one of the biggest questions when you get in is, I don't know how to do anything. And people will say, well, you have to evaluate it. And they don't even know how to evaluate it. So, and no one gives out their secret sauce, their calculations and all that stuff. So what we found is we had to find a way to do that, to bridge that gap. And what we started doing is creating all these tools. We have things like the resource list where we have available, attorneys lists and a resource list of servicers and their fee structures, and connecting that dot and say, listen, if you don't know what service you want to use, go look at our chart, see who services loans in the states you're buying, and here's a fee structure. And then make the next step and evaluate assets, get your data points, and then move forward and say, here's the data I need, and here's all the expenses that investors are already using. And all you have to do is plug and play. Now, is a calculator rambusses some of the stuff you and I use personally? No, but it's a huge step up from put a bid out there, bid on UPB, and you know what? I'll call you back for the next 10 grand I need for my next, mastermind. And that really gives a lot of people their sour taste, or they're out of the space in a matter of a year because the deal is not as good as it looks.
Yeah, I definitely over the years, I hear the way people bid is call other people up in the marketplace and see what does a loan of this characteristic trade for, right? It's about 30% of UPB. I'm going to bid that.
Yeah. And it's amazing because we hear so many people say, well, why don't you bid 80% of UPB or, 11 yield? It's like, well, the coupon's a 3% or a 9%. That's a huge difference. Like, there's no way you can really factor in because that coupon rate changes dramatically. You can buy UPB at 100% because the coupon's at 12. And you're like, crap, I'll buy it 100%. And other ones that at 2, you can't buy a thing at 100%, not even 70%, because the return's not there for you as an investor who needs a certain return. So this blanket stair step, I learned over the years by doing it wrong and moved along the way, really kind of worked with things. And I found a lot of investors struggle with that. And I don't know if it's the guru not wanting to teach it or wanting to sell assets and make people happy that they bought, hey, I bought 15 assets this month. It's like, well, are they good? Yeah. Like, well, based on what? I got a good price. And it's like, what's a good price? Oh, well, I bid, it's like the misconnection.
So I think so much software that exists today is built from entrepreneurs within their own business that have a problem and they are looking for a solution. So they start building something and then they're like, wow, I got something I can maybe sell at enterprise value.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I see is happening with you. I assume you started building this for yourself and found that it could be licensed out or, sold out, right?
Yeah, well, it was funny. I think it was 2014 or 15. I was with Kimberly Banks and I was sitting there with her assistant and I was like, oh yeah, I got to make some bid offers. And she was looking over my shoulder and I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm curious how you're doing your bid calculator. And I hit a button and it processed 10 loans. And she says, well, wait, what did you just do? And I says, I processed the loans. She goes, oh, I copy paste into each of our bid calculations, each row. And then I get the number and I go to the next one. I said, what happens if you make a mistake? She goes, oh, you don't want to talk about that. And it's like, this is years ago. And it's like, she learned and I learned that this doesn't work. And it's like, other people had no clue about doing it this way. They're literally plug and playing and hoping and praying that they don't make an error. And that's when I realized, holy cow, I'm maybe one of the few people doing it this way where others are doing copy pasting, which didn't make sense at all to me.
No, I agree. And so where are you going with the big calculator? What's your goals with it?
We're hoping that what we'll do is we'll be combining our portal, a portal at JKP, to encompass both the processing of due diligence, of data collection. We have the ability to capture we have 9,400 agents that are in our database that you can put a property address, you can get their email address, the names, contact information, and go from when you have a tape, get all the data points, bedrooms, bathrooms, square footages, the foreclosure data, the borrower's name, the homeowner's name, their address if the tax is sent somewhere else, annual tax amount, all the data points, about 65 data points. Take the information, then process it to the bid calculation. And then the bid calculator will then run any assets you choose. And in a matter of 15 minutes, be processing things. We're then going into the fact that maybe doing some education stuff and working with other investors to say, how can we move this into real estate and brick and mortar and process things? Then move into the second space where we're able to processing loans by automation of doing things like reading credit reports and doing a value scale automatically. Also finding seller finance notes by scraping county records and getting it based on the data we collect and had an AI use it to analyze it and make sure that we don't have a Bank of America loan, and figure it out based on, does this entity have more than one loan or 3 loans in a year? If it does, we're scrape it off our list. If it's similar to Bank of America, we processed about 12,000 loans in one county 1 year, and we had like 43 different versions of Bank of America, B of A, B.O.A, and on. But if we get the fact that we can create a huge pivot table and say, this is what we have, and scrape it against it, I can literally go into a county record, get the PDFs, use AI, scrape it down, come together, and have seller finance loans in any county that's online. So it's progressing to the point of automating a lot of the processes people are doing manually or buying the list of. I'm not this great at technology, but I like to pretend I am. But we have some good coders behind us that are helping us build those kind of tools down as we move along in the future. So we're hoping that people do enjoy it and purchase it so that we can move on. If not, we'll just keep it internally and just do it for ourselves.
That was going to lead into my next thing. Who the hell's behind the scenes doing this work?
Yeah, it's partial me figuring out the brainstorming, but yeah, we have a team of coders that are really helping us along the process. And as you know, finding coders is not easy to do.
Finding
We've been through a few.
good workers in general, good team members is hard. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So that's our hope. We don't know how the market will accept it, but we're hoping that this will work into it. With notes changing dramatically in the next 6, 8, 10, 12 months, we may not see the inventory we once did. We may move to commercial, but that's still an easy task to do because the automation doesn't care if it's residential or commercial. It's still getting data points based on the property data.
No, I agree. I mean, what are the key data points that you're seeing today that are important to investing? So
for notes in general, you're asking for what goes into the big calculation that matters?
Yeah. What are some of the most important data points that you guys abstract?
Sure. So for our data capturing thing, you have your annual tax amount, right? We're trying to do that. We're working with another team to capture delinquent taxes. That's not going to be as quick and easy as we hoped it was. We capture things like bedrooms and bathrooms and square footages so that when we go into our due diligence phase, we can really hard analyze what the property thing is. If the property is owner occupied based on where the mailing of the taxes go. We also capture foreclosure dockets. So the foreclosure docket tells us if it's in foreclosure. Now we can go to the county records and grab the foreclosure docket number, plug it in, and be quickly there. Using the parcel number can help us get delinquent tax data as well. But for what goes into the big calculation is like your next due date, which comes from the data tape, your property address, your square footage, your address will plug into Google Maps, bring it into your Google Maps Street View, and you have a quick view of it. Things like, maturity date and P&I amount. There's about 8 different data points from the data tape that are required. And then what we do is we add the data from our portal together, and we have a complete picture of what that property looks like, so we can make a successful indicative offer based on true data points that we can capture.
That sounds good. And who are some of the best data vendors in the space, do you see?
So it depends on price, right? We can move to CoreLogic, we can move into these kind of things. Pricing comes in a big factor. You and I both like things that are quality, but also low priced, right? We've talked to some big vendors. You're like, hey, listen, you're looking at $7 an address. You and I are like, for $7, I'll find another way of doing it. So what we had to do is limit what are the avenues we're getting. So some of the data is coming from online websites, but not the traditional scraping way, which is awesome. This is a completely different way of getting data that we're not scraping HTML. So when it breaks, we can't use it anymore. This is a different method of capturing that data, I was shocked when I saw it. Then we're using other paid sites and realtor websites kind of things. So we have different login sites we use. We have 3 or 4 paid sites, and then we have 2 paid sites, and then 3 different free sites we use. We don't use Zillow or whatnot, but we use other sites similar to Zillow to capture just AVM numbers, bedrooms, bathrooms, in case our other sites aren't able to capture it. And we compare data. And we have a couple of sites that are main sites that look at. But the paid infrastructure, we're looking at a price point. That's why the price is, we're looking at charging, the highest amounts, $250 an address to capture it, just because the pricing of the paid sources. That the top line is like 70 cents an address. But you can literally bulk upload an entire data tape with addresses in a matter of minutes, get an entire set of information downloaded back with the original data from your tape back into the same spreadsheet and move along the manufacturing line of processing your bid amount through the bid calculator.
Are you seeing, I mean, I noticed that, since you want to be more in the mortgage space, not the real estate space, that buying first lien, sometimes going through foreclosure, you end up in the real estate space, right? So is there any aspect of this bid calculator or process in which could limit the loans you buy that have a probability of going to REO?
So we tried doing that. We've worked with a few people in the space to get data points, and we've not been able to capture data points to do aggregation of what is the percentage of, we want to get things like if it's been in BK and paid 3 times, what's the odds that they're going to pay out? And I've asked a few of our friends in the space, and they don't have the data. It's a guesstimate, which doesn't help, right? Guesstimates are only good as Zillow estimates. So what we find is that the data points we're looking for, we haven't been able to capture. But what we've done is for rehab is just do a guesstimate of what we think rehabs will be based on the decades of the property. So if the property is 50 years old, we can expect a much larger rehab versus that's only 3-4 years old. A good friend of ours, Tim, he does a lot of REOs. He's managing about 800 to 1,000 a month. And his ideas is that there is no, central point on how much a rehab is going to be. But the fact that we can go by decades and say, listen, if this is this decade, which is the portal capturing that data, saying based on year built, which the portal captures, it then can estimate how much rehab could estimated be versus a house that's built 5 years ago that may only need 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 worth of work.
So it takes a year of construction and the square feet and then puts in a price per square foot? Yeah.
We'd like to get into permits and all that stuff, but we're just not there yet.
So what does the roadmap look for it?
So what we're looking to do is we're starting with some tester people right now to use through Google spreadsheets and just do a manually way of doing it. Eventually, we're going to load into our JKP website, jkpholdings.com's website, into our portal, and then have a process that people log in, they enter their information, and then it will automatically do things, right? We're doing it manually now. The portal's up and running, works great, but we're starting with the bid calculation because we're finding new investors don't get it as well as experience. Mapping is hard. Figuring out what data comms, which I'm shocked with all those gurus educating how they don't teach comm headers. I don't understand why they don't. Like, how many people ask, what's the difference between last paid date and last payment date? Like, paid to date and last payment date. Like, they're two different things, and they don't know. They think the last payment date is the pay to date, and they get lost in that. So that part of education is a gap, I believe, where a lot of the investors are lost on that. So we're trying to find a system that new investors can figure out, but also get into a point where you can expand the variables and allow sophisticated investors to start also working with the calculation. We're using things like IRR, not based on yield, which we did do at one time because yield made sense until someone said, are you holding this loan for 20 years? And I said, no. And they said, then why are you bidding based on yield at all? Because if you're not, you're going to hold it for 4 years, bid it based on IRR and project your sales price, which we converted over and changed that and started using XIRR. And this is the process that we're doing, is seeing how people react to the calculation and say, how can we move it? And then we're going to move into using second space and building possibly calculation to figure that out based on credit reports. So we're hoping to work with some second space knowledgeable people to see if this is something they'd be interested in doing and automating, depending on how supply goes in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. I mean, that's a topic we'll get into in a minute where the market is going. But let's say, I guess one of the questions that come to my mind is, who owns the data if they use it?
So if which data are you talking about?
Like if someone uses the bid calculator, does the company also own a copy? Does the person,
Nope. Right now, it's literally just a click button and it produces it figures out in the spreadsheet. We have a more sophisticated version where it makes a copy of it and it saves into your Google Drive. But we're going to look to automate that and allow you to save it to your computer. At that point, we're not going to see any of that. It'll be their copy, their automation system, and it's something we don't want to get into unless the coder says we have to for certain reasons, then we'll change that. But my plan is not to look over your shoulder. It's just to provide you an automation tool to make it a much more efficient process. And the reason why we're doing this, a lot of people say, why are you doing this for investors? I'm sure you've seen it too. There are so many people out there bidding super high prices because they were told to bid this number, or they lost out and they try upping it above someone else. And they're bidding ridiculous numbers, not doing any due diligence data, and they're buying it. And sellers saying, well, if I can sell for 90, when you're trying to buy for 80, why sell to you for 80? I'm going to keep selling for 90. And if we can, get more of these newer investors who are not sophisticated to bid more reasonably, I think they'd be much more community helpful. The marketplace may adjust a little bit knowing that sellers aren't able to sell at ridiculous pricing unless they're selling bulk to a, institutional sales price.
Does JKP provide any due diligence services or the ability to utilize that spreadsheet for the client?
So we can definitely assist individuals who are not computer savvy or spreadsheets and go through our trade desk, kind of automate some of that process and say, listen, I'm not sure how to use it. I'll pay for the service, but can you provide assistance? We've discussed about doing that. If the demand gets there and people are saying, listen, I don't understand it, I don't want to understand it, just here's my numbers. Can we have a consultation and set it up? I just want to send the spreadsheet and you do it all. We'd definitely be interested in doing that because, at the end of the day, if you want to pay me to do your work and I can do it in a matter of minutes and you pay me for it, absolutely.
Well, that's good. So that might be another service you could provide on top of that concierge service, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I like that idea.
Yeah, I mean, people at the end of the day, people don't want to do any work; they just want money. I mean, they just want a return on their money. They don't want to do any work. So, all the services you can stack on top of that to solve that problem, where it limits the person's work that they got to do, is going to be a win-win.
Yeah, and we provide a lot of these information. We have a huge Facebook group. We have a huge Facebook page. We have a YouTube thing. We've done 1 million webinars. We keep all recordings on there. And a lot of the webinars we've done for 3, 4, 5 years now. We've had all kinds of guests on. And typically we talk about topics that I want to learn about, right? I didn't know much about CFDs. I did a webinar about it. Didn't know much about forced place insurance. We did a huge webinar that I'm still trying to learn from. That's ridiculously crazy. But we're just trying to get people educated because we know that sometimes doing the work is where you learn versus when you're actually in class learning about something that you completely have no clue about. You've never done a deal before. And then you start getting into the thick of things and you kind of get confused and that classroom material is out of there. So we try bringing that community together that it's not about us. It's about everyone kind of working together. Huge networking abilities, networking with others. And I think value comes from networking and realizing that you're not the most brilliant person in the space and that but you do have characteristics that can help a lot of other people because of who you are and what your strengths are.
And so going into, what's been happening in the marketplace, what do you see in regards to pricing and product availability?
I've had a lot of discussion with a lot of people, and I have to agree with the trend. What we all hope is that this whole big thing's happening, and then there's going to be trickling down effect, and we're going to have 2011, 2012, where we have 3,000 assets coming from Granite, and we're buying like crazy. But now there's 15 Granites out there. There's a lot more bigger players who are built at their entire business on doing this. Funds are ridiculous amount of number of funds now doing it, that the trickle down is not where we expect it to be. But we also see that the value of prices of houses is still up there. So it's not the house pricing is dropping and we have a huge inventory. I just don't know if we're going to have that because people can still sell a house. There's not going to be the underwater effect that we had back then that we're seeing at all. I mean, people will still maintain the house. I mean, is it the fact that the government's holding the values up by giving people free money? Or is it the fact that people are able to maintain their mortgages? I don't know, but I just don't see the fallout there was. So I do see the fallout in the business suites and the company, in the buildings out there, and the multifamilies and the restaurants and whatnot. The question is, how do you turn a restaurant into a cash flowing situation if you're still under COVID, or you're still under some kind of protocol, or you're in a bad situation? How do you turn it over where your business, you bought the note on the real estate and no one can move into it, or you can't evict, or whatever the reason is? That I just see that we have to be more creative. We have to figure out the next avenue. I just don't see it being what we're used to for the last 10 years. I just don't see the inventory the same.
Sometimes like COVID, the unexpected shows up and no one has a clue, right? And I kind of feel like that in the current moment as we're at the end of 2020, right? I mean, we have a lot of different forecasters trying to give their opinion on where the real estate market or the economy in general will go, right? And you got some that are very smart that are saying real estate's going to kind of crash on the residential side. And that's obviously depending on the location of within the US. Some will do better than other. But there's a lot of people that are still unemployed, not paying their mortgage. But the craziest thing we've seen this year is the fact that the Fed stepped in and printed trillions of dollars and then put these moratoriums in all these locations to postpone any evictions and foreclosures. What I'm getting at is I don't think, I think what will happen in the future won't show up until it's like there, and everyone will be like, well, why do we?
Yeah, we're all assuming what's going to happen, but we have no clue what it's going to look like, right?
Yes.
Like you said, the government's still holding up with a bunch of free money, and they're holding up foreclosures. So nothing can happen, and people are paying their mortgage because they got money. So what was going to happen? We don't know what's going to look like to predict what's going to look like. Housing prices may drop when the money stops. We don't know. It's hard to say, and I think the economy will bounce back. And like we all said before, we were talking about, I think about 6-8 months ago, saying, before COVID, it was like, I think down, in Florida, like, listen, what's possibly to kill this market? What can there possibly be? This thing is rubbing like crazy, but there's always a housing bubble. There's always something go on. But what's going to be? And none of us could figure out what it would look like. And all of a sudden, left field happened, and said, "Oh, this is what it is." I think that's where our troubles began. That we get comfortable thinking we know everything and we understand everything, but we didn't know what was going to happen in 2005 when things were going crazy and left field happened. And then we got comfortable with it, saying, "Oh, we understand, we learned," but then we're now relearning once again. And I think a lot of us will be incorrect because it's another wave of education that we're having right now.
Yeah, and it seems like anything that's come to market recently, or at least that I've heard about, has had some kind of outlier bid, meaning there was like a grouping of bids and then there's just one person that's paying way over those group of bids and taking the deal down.
Yep.
So it's very interesting because a lot of these loans also have, COVID forbearance agreements on them. And some of these jurisdictions have been extending it. There's certain CDC stuff and, certain states, maybe like Seattle or California, could postpone things longer.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how these people are underwriting these assets, because a lot of it from a yield or, IRR perspective doesn't make sense.
No. Is it people that are just not calculating things right? Or is it dumb money coming in? Or is it, hey, I want to win assets and I'll pay whatever I can pay to win assets and worry about it later. If that's the case, give me a call when you bail out and need to sell some assets, right?
I like to say it's probably OPM, right?
Yeah.
It's large institutional funds that have other people's money that they have to put to work for a few percent and grab their management fees and keep the boat going, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's the smart strategy that we expect people with money to have. There's a lot of people out there that have 3, 4, 5% money that ridiculously low, and they can deal with 6, 7 yield and put management fees and just add interest to it and kill it. But that's just a different gamut for those many smaller investors. But those in the middle, we're looking to go that direction, to move into that direction. We're just not there yet.
So what is your opinion on where the market will go and kind of how these investors can participate or what they should be doing in the meantime?
Open-minded. Be completely open-minded. Try not to get fixated on what has worked in the last 10 years. Start looking at learning about commercial, learning about, finding seller finance notes. Because so many people got into the bank originated, there's a lot of big money into that. I think that finding a different angle, and someone told me the other day they're buying boat loans and churro loans and this loans, and you know what? We look at it and go, what? Like, I'm not learning about that. But 10 years ago, we're all real estate saying we're not going to learn about these mortgage note things, and we did. We adjusted, some later than others, and we should have jumped in. I think you guys did a really good job when you jumped in early and just got in deep. And those who take chances and get in and learn are the ones that are going to come out and be more successful than the others who are waiting for the opportunity to jump in. I think that those people who are learning start looking at what is falling, not what you're hoping to fall.
That's really good. What comes to my mind is the trend is your friend, right? And so many of the outsized returns made in any asset is following a trend and gaining something that's gaining momentum and following that until it loses steam. And I think over the last 10 years, I mean, that has ultimately what worked for a lot of the note buyers and real estate buyers and even people in tech stocks, right? I mean, these were all areas that have did multiples on people's money.
Yeah, absolutely. You have Bitcoin, all these other avenues are out there. And that, just because you're in notes doesn't mean you have to stay in notes. Because after the end of the day, are you doing this because you love notes or the fact that you love being freedom, right? And the money provides you freedom, so you're looking for the return.
It's like some relationships. You get in loving it, right? It's like a first date, right? And then over a long time period of years, things start to change. And then you're just like, okay,
Yeah. You're like, whoa, you mean you're not doing that anymore? And that's the idea is that, people are buying, websites and all these kind of different avenues that because out of our comfort zone, we're just getting too comfortable because maybe we feel we've done well, we've been successful, but this is always changing, and I think that the newer investors coming in, just listen to a lot of investors. Don't, I hear a lot of people say, well, I'm following one person. And I found that to be extremely dangerous. Listen to investors from all different gamuts because even real estate people doing, converting CFDs and mortgage notes, people converting rentals to CFDs, converting over things and learning different aspects so you can adjust and you can take a deal in no matter how it looks and find a way to make it work. And that's what I'm trying to work on too. When someone presents a deal for me, typically the deal is not the problem, right? It's figuring out how to make that deal work for you. Or we're reaching out to investors that are good in that space and saying, hey, I got this opportunity. What can we do together to make this happen? And can you help me work this out? That's, I think, the avenue we all have to explore.
No, that sounds really good. I mean, so what are you doing differently here? And then let's say 2021, right? What do you see yourself doing?
So what we want to do is have our ears open, hugely have our ears open, really kind of listen in on things because right now we're so stuck on notes that we have to start listening, start watching trends, not predicting trends, start paying attention to what is falling, versus what we've done before, because what we've done before, it worked then. I think in 2021, we want to look at different, trends as well as automation to get to the trends working. It could, we have a gut feeling that we're being a completely different investment strategy in 2021. And we don't know what that looks like because everything that's happening right now is still being band-aid together. And then once that band-aid opens up, it may be like Puerto Rico becomes a state and that all changes, right? Hopefully not, but things will change dramatically. And I think that what we want to make sure we're doing in 2021 is doing our best to be accountable to other investors and them being accountable to us and saying, listen, guys, let's work as a team and figure out trends. If we talk to somebody, listen to what they have to say about the trends. Just real estate in general, brick and mortar as well as notes, just right now priced extremely high. And buying high makes no sense at all. So I'm looking to get into different avenues, looking to get into seller finance situations still, looking to get into maybe even getting into some funding situations where we'll be doing some funding deals. We've also want to get into more of tools that will make sense at the time and work towards becoming also partially a more tech company. We have some great friends that said, listen, we're more tech company now than real estate. And it says, what? They're a huge company, but they're more tech now than anything else because tech is helping you become successful and watch out for things. When red flags happen, you start adjusting. I know they told me that they found out REOs they're selling at auction and they're holding things too long and the returns are dropping because they're holding it. So they're selling loans and REOs for under what their basis is to get rid of it because the problems after the end of it, where they hold a loan for REO for 3 to 6 months, way too long, carrying costs adds up, and they realize they lost money hoping for a bigger payout. So watching the trends and can keep track of things.
That was great. Well put. And I hope, much success, obviously 2021. Yeah. And I hope we see opportunities for all the, distressed mortgage buyers, real estate buyers over the next 2 years, right? I mean, that's how most of us have made money over the last 10 years. And so the opportunities will show up and everyone should just be patient, raising capital and preparing for them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And so our final question that we leave off with is, what is the biggest thing you have implemented in your life that has increased your net worth?
I'm probably redundant for a lot of the guests. networking, huge thing, networking. And I would say the second part is, which is a little crazy, is listening to people that are not in your space. Discuss with them what you're doing and let people who are not in your space help you make sense of it. I've had a conversation with my wife, say, what are you doing that for? That makes no sense. And that outside view is complete sense, which is crazy because you're like, well, you don't understand the space. And then you sit down and you think about it and going, holy crap, they were right, because they get out of the emotion. So between listening to people that have nothing to do with my space and just bouncing a day off of them and branching out my network to work with people in a more closely knit fashion, that growing my closer circle to add more people into it and have that accountability, the little mastermind mentality, and really stay in touch with them. Those two avenues that I've done in the last 6 months has definitely increased where I'm going, and also increased my experience and knowledge of what I feel is happening. Those two factors, I think, are a huge factor for me right now.
That's good. So creating the best network you can and getting outside opinion from that network on what you're doing to better improve your processes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that. It's a lot. Now, I'm sure all our listeners might want to get a hold of you. So what is the best way they can reach you?
Absolutely. You can shoot us an email at dputz@JKP Holdings, or go to our website, jkpholdings.com, or we have our East Coast Distressed Note Investing group on Facebook and Facebook page. A million different ways, but just shoot us an email or check our website out, and that's how you connect with us.
Well, thank you for coming on today, Dave.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it, man.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching my latest interview. If you like what you saw, please click the subscribe button below to become a member of the Joe Robert community. Be sure to hit the bell to turn on all notifications so you always know when I post a new video. Tell me what you thought about the content in the comments below. I always read them and would love to answer any of your questions.